You see this clip? This is a really good one.
Barack Obama made Obamacare, and all those states got the free money. And now all of a sudden, Medicaid doesn't look anything like it was supposed to, and it's 95% financed by the federal government. It's supposed to be a state program.
And the longer we leave it that way, the more permanent that becomes.
Right, because people get addicted to the free money. Let's talk about something special you're doing at Fox Business.
Does anyone in chat remember how bad it was before the Affordable Care Act? I think in large part, the reason why people don't recognize the seismic shift between then and now is because back then, more people had jobs that provided healthcare. Not enough, but more people. For those of you who don't know, prior to the Affordable Care Act, in a lot of cases, health insurance companies would not cover you if you had any kind of pre-existing condition. And they would really look to find these. So your options for getting on healthcare, you had to be poor enough for Medicaid, old enough for Medicare, or some other conditions, right? Or you had to be an employee at a job that gave you healthcare. But if you weren't in one of those three categories, as in you had a job that paid enough that you couldn't get Medicaid, you weren't old enough for Medicare, but your job didn't give you its healthcare, you had to go to the private market to get healthcare. And God forbid you had eczema when you were a kid, because the health insurance companies would deny you no matter, well, I shouldn't say no matter what, but they would deny you pretty often. Basically, any real health issue made it borderline impossible to get insurance. The Affordable Care Act, as much of a compromise as it was, it did get millions and millions and millions of Americans insured by, among other things, compelling insurance companies to take you even if you had pre-existing conditions. And the insurance companies have been plotting their revenge ever since. Oh boy, we're finally going to get it. I really do think a lot of people don't remember what it was like. Maybe it's because it was like a different demographic of people, because what we're looking at now, what we're staring down the barrel of now, these Medicaid cuts, about 10 million people, give or take 10, 13, whatever, are going to lose their health insurance based on these upcoming changes. I can't believe it takes a decade for people to forget. It's going to be so socially destabilizing that this is one of those things that, to me, it feels like like that line, or they're governing like they're not going to have to run for election again. You know, this line, they've gotten addicted to the free money. Like they are acting like they're not going to have to win your vote again. They called the rollout of the Affordable Care Act a disaster because millions of people were trying to get health care and it broke the site. Yeah, sorry. I don't know how tangentially related this is, but it's pretty funny. Speaking of healthcare companies plotting their revenge, BlackRock is suing United Health for giving too much care to patients after the CEO was murdered. You see, you're failing in your fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder profits. So one of your shareholders, BlackRock, is suing. As is the case with everything private, right? The point of health insurance companies is to siphon wealth from you up into the shareholders. And BlackRock actually did get a little bit nervous after the assassination of their CEO. They did start approving people a little bit more regularly, probably because they wanted to avoid any follow-ups. And they're getting sued for it. It's crazy. The lawsuit alleges that United Health misled investors by not being clear about how this negative publicity. I hate the narrativization in this article, but I guess it's from Medium. That's on me for choosing a Medium article to look at. Breaching their fiduciary responsibilities under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Same basic thing, same premise. We're supposed to help people. We're supposed to help our people, Bob. Man, they would not have that in a modern. They would not have that in a modern movie, would they? That's too woke for today. The first Incredibles with Bob's boss and the insurance company that he worked for and throwing him through the wall. They couldn't, because of woke, they couldn't do that anymore. Anyway, sorry. The point that I was trying to get at here is just that I think that the language is going to shift towards more like, I don't know, borderline Malthusian shit over time, because somehow Republicans are going to have to absorb around 10 million people losing insurance, right? They're going to have to absorb the rhetoric on that. And I don't know how they can do that without, I guess, breaches into like open contempt like this. What they've been trying to lean into more and more, I think, they've been trying to lean into this like Medicaid was intended for like quadriplegic, disabled 53-year-old mothers of 7. And it's a disgrace that regular poor guys are using it. you know, who don't have a job or whatever. So they're going to frame it as like, well, the people who are losing this insurance are only losing it because they're lazy do-nothings who don't have a job, you know, like they're choosing to lose it essentially by not working. They're stealing from the government, they're being lazy, et cetera, et cetera. That's what Mike Johnson's been on whenever he talks about the upcoming Medicaid cuts. Is this the clip that I'm thinking of?
The CBO found that nearly 8 million Americans will in fact lose their insurance coverage because of the changes this bill makes to Medicaid. So how do you reconcile that with what President Trump said?
We're not changing Medicaid, and we're not changing Medicare, and we're not changing Social Security.
Can you guarantee that your voters who supported the election, particularly working class voters, will not lose health insurance under this bill?
Oh, they won't lose health insurance?
It's directly in line with what the president said. I've said the same. We are not cutting Medicaid in this package. The numbers of Americans who are affected are those that are entwined in our work to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. Medicaid is not intended for non-U.S. citizens. It's intended for the most vulnerable populations of Americans, which is pregnant women and young single mothers, the disabled, the elderly. They are protected in what we're doing because we're preserving the resources for those who need it most.
So 1.4 million people.
He can barely stop himself from laughing. No, seriously, like even he's grinning through every word.
Vulnerable.
Like like literally on every frame that you pause it at, he's trying not to smile. Not so much this one.
Americans, which is pregnant women.
He gets it under control around here. But from see in the earlier bits,
the numbers of Americans who are affected.
He loves it. He loves it. Do you think he genuinely gets off on poor people suffering? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt.
They shouldn't have been receiving them because they were committing waste, fraud, or abuse.
Yeah, look, my district, as every district in America, has people who are on the program who shouldn't. And when you're talking about, I keep using this example, a young able-bodied man with no dependents, there's no reason he should not be working. We are the party about...
Keep in mind, there are plenty of young able-bodied men with no dependents who are working, who are on Medicaid, right? That's the point of Medicaid.
That supports human dignity. And we find purpose and dignity in our work.
This guy's actually unique in how transparently evil and sadistic he is. He was the right choice for the Republicans' Speaker of the House. He has done a remarkably good job of whipping the entire party into passing legislation that will eradicate the country. He's putting the work in. Also, Tapper's gleaming on his work tour, on his book tour. You mean the book about Biden's mental decline? I'm in favor of that book. There's some insane shit in that book, by the way, that I've seen people talking about. Notice how poor people weren't in the list of those who should receive Medicaid. Wait, let me get that again.
In line with what the president said, I've said the same. We are not cutting Medicaid in this package. The numbers of Americans who are affected are those that are entwined in our work to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. Medicaid is not intended for non-U.S. citizens. It's intended for the most vulnerable.
So tie it back to immigrants, tie it back to the like immigrant hysteria that the party has been pushing forward. The idea that like, well, actually, you know, they're not making life worse for you. It's actually all the Venezuelans coming up that they're trying to cut it for.
Populations of Americans, which is pregnant women and young single mothers, the disabled, the elderly.
So, and this is, it's picture perfect, really, because if you're a man, fascists want you to die. Male disposability, funnily enough, is most practiced by the people most concerned with male disposability. Why the fuck should Medicaid be for women specifically? Do women suffer from more health conditions than men? Okay, maybe like on the margins, women live longer than men. Why? Like the pregnant women, single mothers. Okay, what about single fathers? No? This isn't, mind you, because Mike Johnson and the Republicans hate men, okay? It's because women are incubators and men are soldiers. It's what fascists want of their people, right? You want people in a constant state of hysteria. You want people divided into strict essentialist gender roles. Actually, all roles should be essentialist, right? Your value and your role should be determined by as empirical and concretely determinable a force as possible, right? Like your citizenship, which is literally a yes-no check. Your race is less concretely determinable, of course, but they can if they try, right? You know, even if they're winging it. RFK Jr. does this as well. You pieces of shit, you thought we were done with this topic. Yes, RFK Jr.'s obsession with strict criteria and determination for things like autism and ADHD also factor into the fascist worldview. The idea of cognitive degeneration, that people who have suffered as a consequence of liberal degeneracy or exposure to influences which hurt them, like vaccines, for example, are written into the brain like code, because the idea that they might be socially determinable upends the fascist obsession with essentialism. Phew, I brought it back. Anyway, with regards to men and women, the goal here is, if Medicaid is cut, it will be because you are a lazy, jobless man who needs to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and go get a real job. Medicaid should be reserved for the weak, i.e. women, the disabled, and elderly. Even though there's no actual reason why women can't work, but it's necessary to factor them in that group, to put them in that categorization. What about trans people? That is a funny little inconsistency, by the way, because I guarantee you, conservatives think of transgender people as disabled. They do. They think there's something wrong with you, right? You think you're what they're talking about when they talk about Medicaid acceptance? No. It's not actually about disability. It's not about helping anyone, really. It's about carving off legitimate subsections of the population to exclude from this, right? And the reason they want to do that is because it's easier politically than saying we're cutting the program. Now, if you get dropped off Medicaid, it's because you're a worthless eater. Why does he say elderly? Isn't that Medicare? There's some overlap in some cases, but don't worry, Medicare is going to get cut eventually as well. But I thought capitalists needed both people in the household working. It is an inconsistency. Yeah. Economically, the way this country is being run right now basically demands a dual income for every household. But politically, the administration wants to bring back this, men are soldiers, women are, child rearers business, right? It's an inconsistency. It's an inconsistency, by the way, that was also present in Nazi Germany. To a large extent, you have this competing dialectic, right? Where on one hand, you have the essentialist role, service to the state, and on the other hand, you have that, well, also you should be working every wretched moment of your miserable life to afford your rent, It's not consistent. To be fair, if the workforce was removed, wouldn't wages have to go up to accommodate the lack of labor supply? No. Why would they do that? Why would they let that happen? It's gonna get rough, man.